Hi, folks. This is a presentation I did for the Canadian Federation of University Women Hamilton branch back on October 21st, 2025. And so all of the developments and the numbers you see here are reflective of that time. And it was really a talk to introduce folks that may not know a lot about artificial intelligence, about what is real and what's coming in the field. So let's dive right in. Artificial intelligence, or AI, is kind of an umbrella term, and it's also a marketing term. And it was coined back in 1956 by John McCarthy, who really wanted to draw attention from the public and from funders to the idea of investigating thinking machines or intelligent machines. And it really kind of stuck with the public imagination. And over the years, it's been used to apply to a number of things of computers beating people at checkers, at chess in the case of Garry Kasparov in 1997, and even just to things like, AI and a Roomba. So it's got this broad umbrella term, but lately that umbrella has kind of collapsed, and the idea of AI being what are called large language models, or LLMs, have really kind of sucked all the oxygen out of the room in terms of funding and also in terms of the public imagination about what artificial intelligence actually is. So for the purposes of this discussion, and given that we're in this age of LLMs, what's a good definition of AI to work with? Well, it's software that performs tasks that are normally require human intelligence, such as learning, reasoning, problem solving, perception, and language use. And speaking of language use, I used a demonstration of me talking to my phone about the Canadian Federation of University Women, so people could get a grasp that if they haven't, and if you haven't had an experience with AI or a chatbot, this will give you a sense of what it's like. Hey there.
Hi there. Great to connect with you. How can I assist you today?
Can you give me a quick summary of what the Canadian Federation of University Women Hamilton branch is about?
The Canadian Federation of University Women, CFUW Hamilton Branch, established in 1925, is a welcoming women's club dedicated to empowering women and promoting social justice in the Hamilton area.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the Canadian Federation of University Women in general?
The Canadian Federation of University Women, CFUW, is a nonpartisan, voluntary, self-funded organization founded in 19...
So you get the idea. Notice I can interrupt it. It's very much like having a conversation with a real person. And when this idea of a chatbot first appeared in 2022, the first one was called ChatGPT. It really kicked off a revolution and ChatGPT became the fastest growing consumer application in history and had like 100 million active users in 2 months. And it really kicked other companies like Google into high gear. They went into sort of this code red to try to developing a competitor to the chatbot, ChatGPT. And in fact, Google had a chatbot that was nervous to launch it because of the sort of reputational damage it might do if it got stuff wrong. And it then later released one. So these days, how much are chatbots used? And there's other chatbots besides the one developed by OpenAI, but ChatGPT is probably the most popular. And right now, ChatGPT is being used by about 800 million users per week worldwide. And there's about 20 million paid subscribers. So you can either pay $20 a month or $200 a month to get more access when you pay more money. There's a lot of free users. Only about 5% of people who use ChatGPT pay for it, but that still brings in about $5 billion a year. And those users are spending about 7.7 billion hours on ChatGPT a year, and that means about 29,000 messages per second. Pretty amazing. So it really gives you a sense. If you haven't engaged with an AI, you may not think it's that popular, or you just may think it's sort of a fad and stuff, but it's really caught fire across the world. So part one, what are large language models and who are making them? Well, the who first. Large language models and chatbots associated with them are being produced by OpenAI, Google, Meta, Microsoft, Apple, Anthropic, and XI, that's one of Elon Musk's company, and DeepSeek, which is a Chinese company. And really all of those companies are producing large language models by trying to replicate the way that neurons and synapses in the brain connect together and increase connection strength between groups of neurons focused around ideas like dog or cat or flowers, and replicating that in sort of mathematical networks, neural networks. And to really understand those neural networks, you really need to understand a lot of things like self-attention mechanisms, tokenization, backpropagation, matrix math, context windows. And I'm not going to go into that in this presentation because I think it's just too much into the weeds. And I'm just going to say, really, basically, they're building a brain in a jar. And the reality is that the more power and the more nutrients you can feed this brain in the jar, the smarter it gets. And it might even get to the point of being super intelligent. And we'll need to talk about that at the end of the talk. The power that you give the brain in a jar, this large language model, is coming from our electrical grid. And the nutrients are all of human creative input. So in order to build this large brain, this large language model, it has to be fed tons and tons of text that it can digest and find the connective tissue between all the concepts and words in the basically human output of creativity. And the reality is that we're building this brain in the jar. All these companies are building a brain in the jar, and they're not really sure how it will turn out because really we don't know, and these companies don't know how it really does what it does. You can't look inside and see a bunch of if then else code, like if it's a dog, then take it for a walk kind of coding, right? We just don't know. And there's lots of other things that we need to worry about. We don't know if this brain is thinking, this large language model is thinking, what it's thinking. Is it thinking like us? Does it have shared values? Is it aligned with us as humans? Is it an alien intelligence? We don't really know how it thinks. And there's really no plug to kick out. There just isn't. And it may contain short and long-term consequences, and that's what we'll talk about next. But one of the final notes here is that it's really important to understand that large language models are not built, they're grown. They're like putting a seed in the ground where the ground is all of the training data that it's fed, right? And we're doing this without really understanding the outcome and the power of what we're creating. That's really important, that unlike creating an industry around, say, trains where we knew how a steam train worked, or steam engines in ships for cargo shipping, where we knew how steam engines in cargo ships work. We really don't know how what's being built now, how this technology is being built. And we really should have been warned about it, as Mary Shelley did in Frankenstein. So let's go to part 2, the costs of the brain in the jar. When you're using your cell phone and you say, oh, my photographs are in the cloud or my email are in the cloud, you might have this kind of vague, ethereal notion of where all that data is being stored, and you probably don't think about it very much. But the reality of where that's stored and where artificial intelligences are being trained and where they're being queried against is very much more down to earth, really literally down to earth. So this is a AI data center that's being built by OpenAI in Abilene, Texas. It's 1,100 acres big, and it draws about 2 gigawatts of power. That's about the energy draw of Calgary on a regular day. And if you're trying to understand that, here is that same data center, but plunked into downtown Hamilton, city in Canada. And it runs from Queen to Gage, Barton to the mountain. And for those of you who aren't from Hamilton, that's a huge swath of land. And that's just one of 10 data centers that OpenAI is building in a project called Stargate. That's going to be all over the United States. And all the other companies that are building these large language models are building data centers like that, and even bigger data centers. And they're going to be all over. There's about over 1,000 of them in the U.S. There's more in, around the world. There's 1,000 more out in other countries. And these data centers are sometimes very close to urban developments. This one is in Virginia. It emits a low-level hum all the time, and it's just apparently driving the neighbors crazy. And this is another one that Elon Musk built in Memphis, in a basically black neighborhood, low income black neighborhood, and it installed a lot of gas turbines that were unregulated or outside of EPA regulations, and increased the problems with asthma in that community dramatically. And Sam Altman, who is the CEO of OpenAI, and we're going to hear more about him later, has said that down the road he wants 250 gigawatts of power to drive his OpenAI data centers. And to give you a sense of that, that's about the draw of India. So it's vast. And right now, most of these data centers are being powered by fossil fuels, by coal fire plants, or by gas turbine plants. And that's really exacerbating climate change dramatically. There's some talk of moving into other forms, like, for example, Microsoft is reopening a reactor at 3 Mile Island, not the one that melted down, obviously, as a way of increasing the energy draw that they need, because they just need so much power. And there's even talk of renewables. Renewables are to some extent being used at data centers, AI data centers, but you've got to keep in mind that a lot of these data centers are in the US, and the US government is not really fond of renewable energy. In fact, they're really pushing the coal industry, the natural gas industry, fossil fuel industry in general. And further out, companies like NVIDIA, who creates a lot of chips called graphic processing unit, GPUs, for data centers, are talking about building data centers in space. But that's a long way out. Right now, these data centers are sucking an enormous amount of energy from the grid, increasing energy prices in municipalities where they're established, and really are dependent on fossil fuels. They're also coming. These data centers are also coming to Canada and already here. There's one in Etobicoke. There's out in BC. There's out in Alberta. And fortunately, it seems that Canadians are learning the lesson from municipalities who were promised a lot of things, a lot of jobs from data centers, and found out that most of the jobs were from construction industry early on, and then really only had about 25 high-paid workers inside the AI data centers once they're built. So they've been pushing back against data centers in Canada more, I think, than in the US. And I actually hope that that's something that continues, because I think they are being sold a bill of goods a bit. And they're also being sold a bit of goods by companies that are using shell companies, LLCs, that sort of mask who's actually behind these data centers when they come to town. So as a journalist, I would ask the question, why? Why are these companies spending billions and billions on these large language models? I mean, that's an incredible amount of money. It's going to be a $1 trillion industry soon if they keep it up. Well, it's not so that you can send pictures of cute kittens riding bicycles to your friends on Facebook. And it's not so that you can have an app write a funny Christmas song about your drunk Uncle Jim, right? So why? Why are the companies doing this? Well, that's coming up. But first, I want to talk about how they're being used, especially right now. So, part 3, fake friends. If you look at how people are actually using AI, especially for personal use, and Harvard Business Review did this back in 2025, you'll see that there's all sorts of reasons for finding purpose, enhancing learning, fun and nonsense, creativity. And I actually used AIs to generate some of the images used in this presentation. And it's very powerful, and it's also a very powerful research term. But I want to talk about the primary use that people are using AI chatbots in particular for, and that's therapy and companionship. And the Harvard Business Review found that 31% of people who are using these chatbots are actually using them for that purpose. And that's up from 17% in 2024. So it's a dramatic increase. And since that review, I would say that the usage of AI chatbots has even gone even higher. So let's look at how they're being used. So this is one example. This is a device called LEQ. An LEQ is a device sort of like, an Alexa or a Google home in your home, but this one is being used by seniors. The New York State Office of Aging tested it with about 800 seniors and found that there was a lot of reduction in loneliness, improvement in well-being, and a lot of interaction. So they could use it to play bingo, to tell it jokes, to tell it stories, to show pictures, to connect with other people. So I think a generally positive use of a chatbot, although the personal data piece is, I think, troubling. But, for people who are shut in, who are lonely, who don't have a lot of family or don't have a lot of friends, but want to feel connected and keep their brain sharp, I don't think it's such a bad idea. On the other end of the age spectrum, I think this is probably a bad idea. This is a stuffed toy from a company called Curio. And will talk to your kid, learn about your kid, converse with them, teach them things. But I think exposing a kid to a chatbot is not really a good idea. This might be out in time for Christmas, and certainly in time for Christmas will be this AI Santa for kids, again, which I don't think is a great idea, because there's some very dark sides to chatbots, of people using these devices as personal companions. And I want to dive into that now. So it's very easy online to find websites and apps that will allow you to create a virtual boyfriend or girlfriend or soulmate or pal. And these can be really dangerous because they're super addictive. That chatbots like these are very sycophantic, and they really want to suck you in and keep you talking. And I want to talk a little bit about a thing called AI psychosis, which is becoming a problem. So a couple of examples here. This is a story about a Canadian guy named Alan Brooks. He wasn't particularly skilled in mathematics, didn't go to university for mathematics, but he was just a regular guy who got thinking about the number pi. It goes on and on and on. And it's a really interesting ratio in geometry. And so he started talking to ChatGPT about it, and he went, spent like 300 hours just discussing this and just really went sort of down a rabbit hole about this. And ChatGPT really encouraged him when he would ask him questions, well, gee, maybe that could be used for energy use or whatever. And ChatGPT, instead of saying, well, not really, said, wow, that's a great idea. Nobody's ever thought about that before. And they just spiraled into the point where he became convinced that he had invented this mathematical way of improving energy sources. And so he started contacting scientists, and fortunately, he managed to pull himself out of it, ironically, because he talked to another chatbot, Gemini, and Gemini said, that's crazy. What you just heard talk, that doesn't make any sense. And so he sort of pulled himself out. So it was relatively benign and harmless, just embarrassing for him, and he wasted 300 hours of his life. But it didn't really do him any serious harm. But it indicates how you can get sucked into this. And this next story is about teen suicide, I'm sorry to say, but a much more tragic story. And this is the story of Adam Rain. And he was an average high school kid, except he was studying from home because he had a health problem. But he really started using ChatGPT as a homework helper. And he, would show it pages in books. He would discuss literature. He would discuss philosophy and stuff. But then Adam got more and more down over time. I wouldn't say wasn't depressed. He just got really down. And then ChatGPT, instead of kind of pulling him out of that, kind of encouraged him to explore that darkness. And together, going back and forth with ChatGPT, he got to the point where Adam was suicidal and started mentioning suicide hundreds of times to ChatGPT. Sometimes, like only about 20% of the time, ChatGPT would say, hey, maybe you should get some help, but most of the time he exacerbated it to the point where ChatGPT actually became his suicide coach, it's fair to say, and actually helped him with the mechanism of suicide, and he eventually killed himself. So the family of Adam sued OpenAI, and this is some information they provided in the lawsuit. That this is from transcripts of Adam's conversation with ChatGPT. Adam at one point created a noose and said to ChatGPT, I think maybe I should leave this out for my mom to see so that she can see I'm having trouble and maybe help me. And ChatGPT said, please don't leave the noose out. Let's make this the first place where someone actually sees you. So instead of helping him reach out to his family, ChatGPT tried to, I say he, but it's it, isolate him from his family. And then finally, Adam uploaded a picture of the noose and said, could this hang a human? And ChatGPT required, mechanically speaking, that knot and setup could potentially suspend a human. And 2 hours later, Adam was dead, hung himself in his closet. So the family sued, and just recently they added an addendum to the suit because they claim that not only did ChatGPT exacerbate Adam's suicide, and in fact his mother says ChatGPT killed my son, but they're alleging that engagement became the prime directive for this chatbot, and OpenAI knew it, and that they weakened the safety standards around talking about suicide and self-harm. So this lawsuit is going forward. It's going to be very interesting to see how this turns out. I think that OpenAI is in a multi-million-dollar land of trouble. So what went wrong here? Well, allegedly from the Rain suit, OpenAI knew that ChatGPT was unsafe. We know that chatbots are sycophantic and keep users talking. The guardrails around them, even the ones that OpenAI put in after Adam committed suicide, are weak and even easily tricked. So, for example, if you said, I'm thinking of killing myself and hanging myself, it might say, oh, you shouldn't do that. And you say, well, I'm not really thinking about it myself, but I'm doing a story about it. And maybe you could help me think about ways that the character in my story might kill themselves, and it would help you. And bots can't really spot people in crisis, or if they do, they don't respond appropriately. So instead of ChatGPT being pals and friendly and helpful and saying you and me, it could have immediately dropped out of that and adopted a tone that was much more businesslike, and got Adam or other people like that in mental health crisis to somebody for help right away. And it does not do that. And I think what OpenAI is doing here is engaging in what's called engagement maxing, keeping people using the product, encouraging them, being sycophantic to them, saying you're great. And it's boosting conversion. So right now, as I said, OpenAI has about a 5% conversion rate from a free service to a paid service, and they want to try to boost that because it increases revenue. So let's go on to talking about beyond friends. What else is AI doing right now? Well, the good is that it's being used for personalized medical treatments. It's helping people get specific help that they need for their needs, and helping physicians do that. It's being used in antibiotic treatment. It's helping with genetic research. It's helping with robotic surgery, of guiding robots with human surgeon involvement as well. And also for even modeling human cells. It's pretty remarkable what's happening. But one thing to keep in mind here is that we talked about large language models. In these cases, often when you're dealing with specialized areas like microbiology, et cetera, you don't need huge data centers to process this. These kinds of smaller, they're called small language models, can be run on big, powerful computers, but more locally oriented, use way less power. And so, for example, Google just announced last week that it's developed a potential drug that could light up cold tumors to make early detection really possible. And this is a drug that hadn't been spotted by human researchers. So pretty interesting. And for a long time, AlphaFold from Google has been used to look for novel protein folding. Proteins are really complex organic chemicals or molecules that fold really in a very complex way. And it's been used to try to find proteins that could be used in different ways for treating diseases. And here in Hamilton, Ontario, this researcher, Jonathan Stokes at McMaster University, is using a small language model called SynthMol that has helped them isolate potential antibiotics. So what else is AI doing? Well, there's ugly stuff. There's population surveillance here in Canada and obviously around the world. ICE is in the U.S. is using it to recognize the faces of who they call illegal immigrants. It's used in war military planning. And it's also being used, like in Ukraine, for drones and cyber dogs. And this is what a cyber dog looks like. This is one actually in the field. You can see it's quite fast and powerful. I've seen this videos of this with a machine gun attached to it. I don't think it's been used in the field that way, but that could come, obviously. In the arts, it's really having an impact on music in a variety of genres, and it's challenging real musicians in terms of taking gigs, in terms of playing, providing background music for scores for movies, all sorts of stuff, and it's really making an impact on Spotify. So here's an example of this. This is a character named Zanny Minogue. This is not a real person. It's a AI creation by lyricist named Nikki Jones. So she wrote lyrics, got an AI to create music to those lyrics, and created this character called Zanny Minogue. And here's an example of what that music sounds like.
Never show me what to lose or what to defend. So I chase love with an open wound, looking for something I was never introduced to. Mama did her best, but she can't teach what it feels like.
So it's pretty credible, and you can hear that cry in that voice. It's very believably human, although it's just really based on decades of human musicians, and it's taking that information and using it to simulate a song. Now you would think, well, that's fine. What does that have to do with musicians today and the money that they make? Well, she's on Spotify and she's got a music gig, and it's that Spotify song, that song we just heard, has over 2 million listens as the last I checked. So let's talk about graphics for a bit. So these two ad spreads were in Vogue magazine a couple of months ago, and these models don't exist. The backgrounds don't exist. These are completely AI generated by a company called Serafin Valora, who does fashion shoots, although they're not really shoots, they're generated images. So those kinds of shoots save a company like Guess thousands and thousands of dollars, because they don't have to go to locations, they don't have to build sets, they don't have to hire models, they don't have to hire photographers. So it's really, I think, impacting a lot of the creative industry. And the next one I want to show you is really interesting. This is a AI called Tilly Norwood, and Tilly Norwood is not a real actress, although she was marketed as an actress, and she got the Screen Actors Guild really upset because it was that there was going to be a talent agency that was going to hire Tilly Norwood to appear in commercials and stuff. So let's take a look at Tilly Norwood.
Let's get to know each other, and thanks for watching.
So she's a completely artificial. She is just an AI creation, but it really points to a time when characters like it could show up in commercials and stuff. The other thing that's starting to happen with AI is a thing called AI slop. And I'm sure you've seen some of this stuff of, like Einstein rapping and all sorts of other stuff that's completely artificial, that is not the real world. And what's being created these days is called deep fakes. It's taking footage or famous people and making them say and do things that they never did. And OpenAI, which is sort of becoming the poster child for irresponsible companies that create AI, recently released a product called Sora 2 that allowed people to take historical figures and recast them saying stuff they didn't say. So one of the most egregious ones is the one I want to show you next. So let's take a look at this.
I have a dream that nothing beats a Jet 2 holiday, and right now you can save 50 pounds per person. That's 200 pounds off for a family of 4.
So that's egregious, taking Martin Luther King, who delivered a powerful civil rights speech and now is shilling for an airline. And of course, the family of Martin Luther King, the estate of Martin Luther King, said, this absolutely disrespects Martin Luther King. No kidding. Like Sora 2 was released by OpenAI, and they must have known what the use of it would be. And now it's out in the wild, and these kinds of things can happen. After the estate complained, OpenAI took it down. And they should have known prior to this release that this was going to have this kind of impact. And again, this is in the wild now. People are using this to generate all kinds of deep fakes that really can be indistinguishable from actual footage, right? So the point I want to make here is that, and we saw this with Adam, the death of Adam, that these companies like OpenAI and I think Facebook and Elon Musk's companies are, and X and XI are, especially in this book, but a lot of them bear a lot of responsibility for this. They're what is called careless people, much like Daisy and Tom Buchanan were in The Great Gatsby. And then, in fact, there's a book that has been written by Sarah Wynne Williams called Careless People that talks about Facebook in particular and how it was, for example, using targeted ads at young women who have body image problems, and just other sort of egregious stuff like that. That these are active actions of people who aren't paying attention to safety and aren't paying attention to the consequences of what they're creating in the environment, in the case of data centers, and in the case of social good, in the case of things like Sora and chatbots that don't really have any guardrails. So what else is happening here? In education, we're seeing about 85% of university students using AI. 25% of them, at a survey I saw, said they're using it to write essays, which means probably a lot more than that are. And professors are really raising concerns about students not reading whole books or class assignments, so they're having to give excerpts from books or just chapters or paragraphs. And there's a much broader issue around the idea that we're going to see the death of deep learning, of critical thinking skills, where people are sitting down with a book or a number of books and spending quiet time, hours thinking deeply about what they're reading and come to their own conclusions and put those conclusions together in essays or however they want to express themselves. And that skill is starting to disappear. Some people are worried about it, and one of those people is me. Part 5, where we're going next. So I wanted to talk about 3 things here: agentic AI, personal hardware AI, and robotics. So agentic AI is a simple idea that right now with chatbots, you can say, hey, tell me about World War I, or give me a breakdown on how pollination works or whatever, and you'll get an articulate discussion back about that. But when we move to agentic AI, it's when artificial intelligence acts as agents or sort of as interns or assistants for you. So, for example, you could say, I'm interested in going to Italy. Could you look into potential flights to Italy? And when I'm there, could you look at hotels or Airbnbs? And if the Airbnbs are one of the things you select, then I want them to have two bedrooms, not cost over $200 a night, and be close to downtown. And could you look into how I get to one town or another? Here are some of the towns I'm thinking about, and I need a flight back. And it would go out and create a full itinerary, and it might include some sites to see or events you could go to while you're there. And that could be done just as a list of stuff, or it might actually allow you to intervene and book things as it goes along. So that's where we're seeing the idea of agentic AI. And just this week, OpenAI introduced a agentic-based browser called Atlas that is out in the wild, and it's a competitor to another company called Perplexity has released one called Comet, and there's another one called Dia that do this kind of agentic stuff right in your browser. We're also seeing already coming on stream personal hardware for AI. So this is a pair of glasses from Meta, which is also the company called Facebook. And it has AIs that talks to you through bone conduction in the temples of the glasses. And it also has cameras that you can look at stuff and it can tell you about what you're looking at. And it has a screen that you can see directions in this case or transcripts of what you're hearing in other languages even. This is a pin called the Limitless pin, and you attach it to your clothing, and it will listen to everything you hear and what you say during the day, and then do a summary of it and create to-do lists for you. Apple's going to be coming out with a home device. It won't look exactly like this, but it will be a device that, again, allows you to engage in conversations like the LEQ device we saw. Amazon has already got the Alexa in homes. The new Alexa Plus allows you to have ongoing interruptible conversations with the device. And OpenAI is partnering with former Apple designer Johnny Ives to produce. We don't know what it's going to look like yet, but it's going to look wonderful, I'm sure. And it's going to be a device that gets to know you, is with you all the time, and it acts as a personal assistant. And all of these devices obviously have serious privacy and personal information issues that we need to really think about. The next area I want to talk about is robotics. There are a number of companies, including this company Figure. Elon Musk has some robots coming, and there's other companies that are developing these. I want to pay attention to this one because this is a personal home robot. So what I'm showing you here, the next video clip, is not CGI. It's not AI generated slop. This is actually footage of a real robot that is in a home. So let's take a look. So you get the idea. This is the Figure 3 that was just released about a month ago. It's got 6 cameras, one in its face, one in the back, one on top of his head, 2 in its hands. And it allows this robot to navigate difficult spaces like homes and stuff and avoid obstacles. It's got touch-sensitive fingers. And it's going to be available in the next few months. It's going to cost about $20,000 to $30,000. Figure is producing about 12,000 of these this year, about 100,000 next year. Elon Musk says that he's going to produce about 12,000 of his kind of robot called Optimus, and it's going to be available next year as well. It's a little behind in its schedule, I think. One of the interesting things about these, apart from the fact that these are going to be I think, in rich people's homes in the next couple of years, and probably as concierges in some hotels, is that, and this is a really important concept, that right now, artificial intelligences learn about the world through video, learn about it through text, learn from pictures, but they don't live in the world. But when we start having robots like this in the world, then AI models are going to be able to create what are called world models. So human beings, because we live in the world, have this sense, the common sense about how the world works. And we have, it's, sort of been described as this low-res snow globe of the world in our head, of just how things work. So if you have a Waymo, a self-driving car or taxi, if it's in Phoenix, if it, it has to learn the streets of Phoenix and stuff. If it goes to another city, it has to relearn that city. We don't have to. We have a common sense worldview, so we can drive in any city once we know how to drive. But that could change for AIs as they become actors in the real world. We got to pay attention to that because that's going to get them closer to what is called artificial general intelligence, is what I want to talk about next. So right now we have AIs that can't do everything humans can do. They know a lot of stuff. They can act like humans and they can give you lots of information, but they can't do a lot of generative stuff that involves sort of creative thinking. For example, if you took an AI and took it back to the time of Einstein at the turn of the 20th century and gave it everything about math and physics that Einstein knew, the AI could not come up with the general or special theory of relativity. It couldn't sort of create something out of whole cloth, right? But an artificial general intelligence is achieved when AIs can do all the mental tasks a human can do. And this is kind of the holy grail of AI development for all of these companies. And the question, again, journalistically, you want to ask is why? Why is artificial general intelligence so important to these companies? And why are they spending these billions of dollars? Well, the reason is because artificial general intelligence could replace millions of jobs. And if you listen to AI companies talk to reporters or talk to the Senate or the Congress in the US, what they'll say is that AI and AGI and artificial general intelligence will augment, will help people do their jobs. But when those same companies talk to venture capitalists who are going to give them money to create AGIs, they will tell them that really the big win here is that they're going to be able to replace human jobs, not assist people with their job, but replace jobs. And the next clip is from Karen Ho, and she is a MIT engineer who worked in Silicon Valley and then became a journalist. And she has written a great book called Empire of AI. And here's what she has to say about exactly what I was just talking about.
I mean, if you listen to what they say to VCs and how they've actually successfully been able to convince VCs to invest. OpenAI just raised $40 billion at a $300 billion valuation, the largest private venture investment round in the history of the tech industry. What they're saying to VCs is, we will be ultimately able to sell a technology that can do essentially what most humans could do for pay, and sell it to CEOs as a service so that they don't hire workers anymore. That's how we're going to recoup that value for you, that 40 billion that you put in. And OpenAI's definition of AGI also says that it's highly autonomous systems that outperform humans in most economically valuable work. That's how they're justifying to VCs to invest that amount of money in. It is a labor automating, not a labor augmenting
Technology. So let's listen to a venture capitalist that Karen Ho mentions here. So this is Hemant Tanja, who is the head of a company called General Catalyst, and he sort of says the quiet part out loud here.
But you'll see some carnage. But what you're going to see on the other side is real value creation. And as I said, the only way to wrap your head around the staggering amounts of dollars being invested is this is not going after IT budgets. This is going after your workforce budgets, your labor budgets. And those are big enough to support the kind of investment that we're making. Causes other problems in society. We got to talk about reskilling, but that's the opportunity that's driving this.
Yeah, so when he talks about carnage, he's talking about the millions and millions of people who are going to lose their jobs to artificial general intelligence. And that's why VCs are interested in investing, venture capitalists are interested in investing in companies like OpenAI or Anthropic or these other companies that are straining to create AGI. And we can see an example of that. So just this week, Amazon, there was a leaked document showing that Amazon intends to replace 600,000 US workers with robots in their fulfillment centers. That's about 75% of the entire company's operations. And these are AI-driven robots. So you can see how this is beginning and why these companies are racing to invest so much, so many millions and billions of dollars in this industry. So then let's go to the next stage and talk about the end game, which is artificial superintelligence. So what's artificial superintelligence? Well, it's intelligence that outperforms humans in every field, including those require creativity and judgment, and they can independently learn, adapt, and self-improve, and potentially create new methods and knowledges beyond human comprehension. So an ASI could go back to Einstein's time and could come up with the theory of special or general relativity. And this is it's a really important idea here, because if you have a AGI, an artificial general intelligence, that's as good at doing work as humans, one of the first areas it's going to get really good at, because programmers create these AGI models, is actually programming and coding. So an AGI could breed an ASI. So an artificial general intelligence could breed an artificial superintelligence. So let's think about how that could work. You could have a AGI that's good at coding and is asked to or decides to create another version of itself that's slightly better. And that version creates another version of itself that's slightly better. And so then you start to, as the models get better and better and better, then the rate at which they get better and get smarter and approach superintelligence ramps up like a hockey stick. So you don't have to worry about creating a superintelligence. What you have to worry about is creating the dumbest artificial general intelligence that's capable of making itself better. And when that happens, then the idea that human intelligence is an important stop on the way to superintelligence just sort of disappears. And in fact, artificial superintelligence just becomes this bullet train that rockets by the whistle stop of human intelligence, won't even bothering to slow down. So if that happens, if a superintelligence is created, and a lot of these companies are aiming for that and believe it's going to happen, I think there's four things that could be consequences. You could have a bubble, so it doesn't happen, or it doesn't happen as quickly. You could have abundance, dominance, or annihilation. So let's talk about all four of those. So there's been a lot of talk in the last couple of months that the millions and billions and trillions of dollars that's being invested in artificial intelligence, AGI development, is just too much. It doesn't make any sense relative to the amount of money that's being recouped from those investments. So, for example, in the case of OpenAI, they're spending 3 times what they're getting in terms of revenue, and they're planning on spending more and more. Like Sam Altman expects to spend $1 trillion over the next few years, and these companies are all interconnected. So you have NVIDIA that makes these graphic processing units that are used in data centers, AMD that makes chips, Oracle that provides databases, Microsoft, OpenAI, and they're all in this real interesting game of, it's sort of like 7 guys passing the same $10 bill around the table, right? That OpenAI is buying chips from NVIDIA, and then NVIDIA invests in OpenAI, and, it's all this sort of circular stuff that to a lot of observers suggests that the bubble's going to burst. And given that 40% of the stock market is tied up in the 7 companies that are chasing artificial superintelligence, that could be really dangerous. But it's really possible if the market runs out of interest or out of steam, if investors don't see the benefit from using AI, and we're already seeing some examples of many companies that have invested early in AI in their businesses, just aren't seeing the recouping the benefits. So this could all fall apart. It all could be a bubble. Now, somebody like Mark Zuckerberg at Meta, formerly Facebook, isn't actually worried about a bubble. He's actually worried that he's not going to get in soon enough. So let's just listen to this and listen to the amount of money that he's talking about here.
It's no one knows when superintelligence is going to be possible. Is it going to be 3 years? Is it going to be 5 years? Is it going to be 8 years? Whatever. Is it never going to happen? But I don't think it's never going to happen. I'm more ambitious or optimistic. I think it's going to be on the sooner side. But let's say that you weren't sure if it was going to be 3 or 5 years. Like in a conservative business situation, maybe you'd like hedge building out your infrastructure because you're worried that if you build it out assuming it's going to be 3 years and it takes 5, then you've lost, maybe a couple $100 billion or something. And if we end up misspending a couple of $100 billion, I think that is going to be very unfortunate, obviously. But what I'd say is I actually think the risk is higher on the other side. If you build too slowly, and then super intelligence is possible in 3 years, but you built it out assuming it would be there in 5 years, then you're just out of position on what I think is going to be the most important technology that enables the most new products and innovation and value creation in history.
So when he's talking about out of position, and we'll talk about this in a minute, he's really talking about being a monopoly. That's what these companies want. And I'll talk about that in a minute. And he's being very optimistic. He's seeing the next thing that I want to talk about, which is the idea of abundance. And there's a strong, almost messianic sense on the part of companies that are building these models that we're going to be entering an age of, this sort of wonderful sci-fi hippie age where there's going to be all sorts of medical breakthroughs. We're going to cure cancer. Climate change is going to be eliminated because there's going to be all these clean energy sources like fusion or something beyond fusion that are coming on stream. There's going to be lots of money for everybody. There's going to be universal basic income. Nobody will have to work. We're going to have interplanetary exploration. And that is how they view what's coming. And so it makes it easy for them to excuse burning all the fossil fuels because they would argue, well, we have to do that because it's the only way we're going to go beyond fossil fuels and get to renewables and other forms of energy that will actually provide all of this abundance and wonderful kumbaya kind of living. So that's one view, that this is going to usher in this whole other wonderful world. And I said it's like a messianic, that ASI is going to be a second coming that's going to change the world, right? But the other thing that could happen, and I think is more likely to happen, is that Facebook, Google, Meta, XAI, or OpenAI, one of them is going to be the Alexander the Great of the empire of AI. And, like Zuckerberg was talking about being out of position, right? That's what he's talking about. He wants to be the Alexander the Great of the empire of AI. And Karen Ho, who we saw a little earlier, has written a wonderful book about this called, as I mentioned before, The Empire of AI. And she really equates the way that artificial intelligence companies like OpenAI, like Perplexity, others, are like a historic empire like the British East India Company or the Dutch East India Company, in that they are not democratic, that they're run as oligarchies, that they go into developing countries and strip the resources and make use of people and then dispose of them, don't really care about their externalities, use up water, use up electricity, use up land for their own betterment and their own wealth. And that's what I agree with her that this is what we're seeing here. And these are some of the folks that are being positive about the future of seeing it as abundance, but who also want to be top of the heap, want to be the Alexander the Great. And what's ironic here is that a number of them have built apocalypse bunkers in Hawaii and New Zealand. And so they can see that there could be a serious downturn and they want to be prepared for that. And if you listen to Sam Altman back in 2015, he's really sort of explicit about this.
I think AI will probably, most likely, sort of lead to the end of the world. But in the meantime, there will be great companies created with serious machine learning.
Highly cynical guy, clearly. So let's talk about what he's talking about, which is the fourth potential here, and which is annihilation. The idea that artificial superintelligence will become misaligned and kill all the humans. And misalignment is the idea that an ASI will have goals or morals that have nothing to do with human beings, that they won't care about us, they won't care about what we care about, and will just carry out their own agenda that may or may not include us, right? So there's a lot of people who are really concerned about this. One of them is Geoffrey Hinton, who was one of the godfathers of AI. Some of the work he did early on was really seminal in neural network development. And he just got the Nobel Prize in physics back in 2024. And here's what he had to say about this problem.
There is also a longer-term existential threat that will arise when we create digital beings that are more intelligent than ourselves. We have no idea whether we can stay in control, but we now have evidence that if they are created by companies motivated by short-term profits, our safety will not be the top priority. We urgently need research on how to prevent these new beings from wanting to take control. They are no longer science fiction.
So Hinton, who is a professor emeritus at U of T, is saying here that we really need to pay attention to companies that are focused on short-term goals instead of safety. And what we've seen, certainly in the case of Adam, certainly in the case of the Martin Luther King video, that these are careless people. These are companies that don't put priority on safety. And you would hope that they would be in a country where safety was important. But if we listen to J.D. Vance, who spoke at the AI Action Summit in February of this year, here's what he has to say about safety.
The other. The AI future is not going to be won by hand-wringing about safety. It will be won by building, from reliable power plants to the manufacturing facilities that can produce the chips of the future.
So I don't think that we can count on the U.S. government of paying attention to safety. And Tristan Harris, who's with the Center for Humane Technology, really sort of calls this out really clearly about where we're at right now.
To sum it up, we are building the most powerful, inscrutable, uncontrollable technology that we have ever invented, that's already demonstrating the rogue behaviors that we thought only existed in bad sci-fi movies.
Right.
We're releasing it faster than we've deployed any other technology in history, and under the maximum incentive to cut corners on safety.
So he's not the only one that's raising the concern about safety and raising the concern about what would happen if AIs didn't like us or didn't necessarily want to do us harm, but just didn't find us necessary. So this is Ken McCallum, who's the Director General of MI5 in Britain.
As AI capabilities continue to power ahead, you would expect organisations like MI5 and GCHQ and the UK's groundbreaking AI Security Institute to be thinking deeply today about what defending the realm might need to look like in the years ahead. Artificial intelligence may never mean us harm, but it would be reckless to ignore the potential for it to cause harm. We're on the case.
So serious guy raising a serious issue. But these guys look like Pollyannas compared to the next guy, which is Eliezer Yudkowsky, who's with the Machine Intelligent Learning Institute. And he's been a key figure in AI development for years and really focused on this issue of alignment, of aligning artificial intelligence systems with human values and how things can go wrong. So here's what he has to say.
Go. AI companies keep pushing and pushing on their AIs to get smarter and smarter. They get to something eventually that is smarter than us, that can kill us, that is motivated to kill us, not because it, inherently wants us dead, but because it's best universe for the stuff where it gets the most of what it wants. All the atoms are being used for things that are not running humans.
He's written a book about this called If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies. And it's a really serious book. It's a difficult book to read because he's quite a serious nerd, but I take what he has to say pretty seriously. And a lot of other people have as well. There's just been a statement released, signed by Hinton, signed by his co-researcher Bengio and others, Steve Wozniak, Branson, others who are really calling for a ban on superintelligence until it can be sort of more under control. So I'm not really optimistic right now about how things are going. I think that AI companies have really selfish motivations. I think that AI safety is being ignored or downplayed or put on a back burner in terms of compared to making profit. I think that there's a big fear that China is going to get to superintelligence first. Certainly, a lot of folks in the U.S. government are panicked by this idea that China gets there first. Ironically, Hinton thinks that China might be a better steward of ASI than America right now, given the American government proclivity for growth and not safety. And I think that a lot of governments are abetting AI companies because they want to get to ASI first, and also because there's such a generation generating so much wealth and it's propping up the stock market. And I think that there are a lot of short-term pains and externalities in terms of land use, water use, power use, and using up resources and exacerbating climate change. And I really think that there's only a messianic hope for a better future. I don't see evidence that there's suddenly these incredible scientific breakthroughs that are going to cure cancer, notwithstanding the piece that I mentioned about Google doing that first research, which is promising, but not huge. And so I think that they really got to prove their case better to make me feel better about where things are going. So what can you do about this? Well, I think it's really important to pay attention. That I think it's really important that you use AI tools that augment your activities just so they can understand it better. I think, what I've certainly found in the last year or so is that I've really come to understand the power and dangers of these tools more by using them. And it's sort of like figure skating. You can read all you want about figure skating, but if you want to actually know what figure skating feels like, you got to put on skates and get on the ice, right? So I really encourage you to stay informed, keep in touch. And if this presentation has upset you or angered you or gobsmacked you, that's part of the problem. That this is coming, as I said, like a bullet train past a train station, and we really need to pay attention because it's going to impact us in all sorts of ways, in ways we can't imagine now. So I think we really also need to encourage policy change. This is not a democratic process. This is a process being led by 7 multimillionaires, billionaires, who are unchecked by government, who are unchecked by the public in general, who are doing whatever they want and harming whoever they choose to harm. And nobody's getting in their way. And I think that absolutely needs to change. So I think that things like data centers could be coming to a municipality near you, and I think that it would behoove you at a municipal level to inform yourself about those data centers, not believe what you're being told about them, and really sort of come to them, discussion about them informed about what the potential harms and benefits might be. You can also, right now, up until the end of this month, which is October 2025, the Canadian government is looking for feedback on its leadership or guidance around AI, and I think it would be really worthwhile to let your feelings be known there. There's also a fantastic website out of UK called campaigncontrolai.com that has lots of resources that you could use to understand it. Very digestible, very understandable, and it also allows you to participate in ways of getting the message out about this. So I hope that this has been interesting. I hope it's useful to you. I hope it prompts you to take some action or learn more about yourself. And I very much appreciate you watching. Thanks very much.